Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in. The stars above the trade lanes were calm, silent as always. Dozens of small cargo ships drifted peacefully through the black, their engines humming gently as they moved across the void. These convoys were routine, slow, unarmed, safe, or so everyone thought. From far away, hidden behind the shadow of a shattered moon, something stirred. It was not human. The ship was sleek, sharp like a blade, and it did not announce itself. It drifted quietly, watching. The alien vessel, a scout from the Therax Dominion, had been following human movements for weeks. Its crew believed the humans were careless, loud, and unprepared. They had watched the convoys travel through unguarded space and decided now was the time. Time to strike. The order was given. Without warning, the alien ship launched its first attack. Green plasma lanced through the darkness, smashing into the rear freighter. The human ship cracked apart in an instant, its glowing engine flaring once before vanishing into the cold. Alarms blared across the convoy. The other freighters panicked, scattering in all directions, trying to flee, but they had no weapons, no shields. One by one, the Therax vessel picked them off, plasma beams cutting clean through hull after hull. The space around them was littered with debris and drifting bodies. And then the last ship in the convoy, small, damaged, and limping, sent out a signal, a call for help. The Therax captain saw it on his screen and laughed. "Let them call," he sneered. "By the time anyone comes, we'll be gone." But he was wrong, because someone had heard. A ripple of energy flickered in the distance. Then, as if space itself cracked open, it arrived. The human warship. No one aboard the Therax vessel had seen one in person before, not like this. They had heard whispers, vague reports, wild rumors. But now, face to face with it, they realized the rumors were not enough. The warship didn't move like the freighters. It didn't run. It glided into view, slow and steady, its surface dark as voidstone, gleaming faintly with energy that twisted like lightning beneath its skin. It didn't send a warning. It didn't speak. It simply locked on. For the first time, the Therax crew felt fear. The human ship was not just a machine. It was something else. Something built not to protect, but to punish. And it was very, very angry. The Therax vessel had spent its existence among the shadows, a predator of the void, striking from the darkness and vanishing before its victims could react. The Therax had learned long ago that silence and speed were the ultimate weapons, more powerful than plasma, more certain than brute force. But none of that mattered now. Because the thing before them, the human warship, was not prey. It was a storm waiting to break. The crew of the Therax ship scrambled, their clawed hands darting across glowing controls, their sleek black eyes wide with alarm. The captain, a hardened warrior with over a decade of raiding experience, hissed a command. "Scan it, now!" His officers obeyed, sending out a pulse of energy toward the looming vessel. Data flooded back a second later. What they saw made their breath hitch. The human ship, designation Invictus, was unlike anything in their records. At first glance, it had the shape of a battleship, but there was something unnatural about it. Its hull was layered with an alloy that their scanners couldn't fully identify, absorbing and scattering their energy waves like mist in a storm. The ship bristled with weapons, railguns that could fire rounds at near-light speeds, plasma arrays capable of carving through the heaviest dreadnoughts. Missile bays lay hidden beneath thick armor, each housing warheads that bent space itself. And then there were the boarding pods. The Therax captain's throat tightened. He had heard stories of human boarding tactics. The way they didn't just destroy enemy ships, but claimed them. The way they sent in soldiers and exoskeletons that turned them into walking machines of war. The way they used hacking drones that didn't just disable enemy systems, but rewrote them. He had dismissed those stories before. Now, he was no longer sure. The Therax vessel had the advantage of speed. It had the advantage of stealth, but it no longer had the advantage of surprise. "Orders?" one of the officers asked, his voice trembling. The captain's mind raced. Retreat was possible. The Invictus was big, powerful, but their ship was small. If they ran now, they could be out of range before the humans locked weapons. But then the ship moved. Not a grand, sweeping maneuver. Not a full-powered chase. It was worse than that. It tilted just slightly, aligning its forward batteries toward them. No rush, no hesitation, no waste of energy. It was a slow, precise movement, like a beast adjusting its gaze before the strike. And then the humans spoke. A transmission cut through the Therax ship's systems, overriding their encrypted channels. The voice was cold, mechanical, yet unmistakably human. "Unknown vessel. You have attacked a Terran convoy. You have 15 seconds to surrender. If you do not comply, you will be neutralized." 15 seconds. The Therax crew froze. "Jam their signal," the captain snapped. "Disrupt their targeting systems. Prepare to jump." His officers obeyed, flooding the area with interference waves. Their ship's engines roared to life, preparing to rip through space in an emergency escape. Then, the Invictus moved. It wasn't a gradual acceleration. It wasn't a calculated push. It was raw, brutal force. 1 second, it was still, a hulking shadow against the void. The next, it was upon them. The Therax ship's sensors screamed as the human warship closed the distance in a fraction of a second. Gravity wells distorted. Energy fields rippled. And then, impact. Not a collision, not a ramming maneuver. The Invictus passed them, its thrusters flaring with unnatural precision, its trajectory so perfectly calculated that it skated just beside their ship's hull, leaving them trapped in its wake. And in that moment, the humans fired. The first strike was not a full barrage. It was a warning shot, a burst of concentrated kinetic energy that barely missed the Therax vessel, sending shock waves that rattled the ship's frame like a leaf in a storm. The captain's claws dug into his armrests. He had seen human weaponry before. He had watched the holovids of their battles, studied the aftermaths of their wars, but never had he felt it so close. The second warning was not a miss. A single railgun round tore through one of their secondary thrusters without detonating it, a precise hit, a deliberate strike. The Invictus had crippled them without destroying them, without even using a fraction of its arsenal. That was when the Therax realized this was not a battle. This was a message. The Invictus could have killed them in an instant. It could have fired its weapons and reduced them to glowing dust before they even knew what happened. But it didn't. It was waiting. The human voice returned, calm, methodical. 5 seconds. The Therax captain's mind screamed with indecision. Surrender meant humiliation. Capture. It meant being at the mercy of creatures who had long been underestimated. But defiance meant death. His hands clenched into fists. Another officer, younger, desperate, turned toward him. Captain? He closed his eyes, exhaled, and made his decision. With a sharp, reluctant motion, he deactivated the weapons. The lights on the bridge dimmed slightly as their systems powered down. A signal was sent, a single word, transmitted to the human warship. Surrender. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, without a sound, the Invictus pulled away, its massive frame gliding backward, putting a careful distance between itself and its defeated enemy. A final transmission came through. Stand by for boarding. The Therax crew tensed. Some recoiled in horror. Others clenched their jaws in quiet rage. But the captain, he only stared at the human warship in silence, because he understood what was happening. This wasn't just punishment. It was the beginning of something much, much worse. A deep hum pulsed through the Therax vessel's frame as the systems dropped to minimal power. All weapons offline, engines idle, lights flickering under emergency power. The crew stood still, breathing shallow, their eyes locked on the void just outside the forward viewport. The human warship Invictus remained perfectly still, unmoving, yet radiating presence like a creature that could strike again at any moment. The Therax captain had never known true silence on his bridge before. But now, even the background chatter of diagnostics, the low murmur of officers communicating, had vanished. Only the low sound of his own breathing remained. They were waiting. The boarding signal came 30 seconds later. It wasn't flashy. No dramatic countdown. No demands. Just a ping. One small encrypted packet of data, clean and efficient. It opened automatically, overriding their security systems, and displayed 2 words in the center of the captain's screen. "We're coming." That was all. The captain's second in command, a wiry officer named Theric, leaned forward, whispering, "They're not just going to inspect, are they?" The captain didn't answer. He didn't need to. They all knew. This was no inspection. This was evaluation. A shudder passed through the ship as something latched onto the outer hull. A docking clamp. Heavy, powerful. The kind of connection used not for trade or diplomatic visits, but for taking control. The bridge crew tensed. Even the more hardened among them felt a twist in their gut. Boarding lights flashed red down the corridor. Airlock doors groaned open, and then they came. They moved in silence, 5 of them in the first wave. Clad in armor so dark it seemed to drink in light, their exosuits were smooth, seamless, with no exposed features. Just black, curved plating, and glowing blue lights at the joints. Their visors bore no insignia, no ranks, nothing but the reflective surface of their helmets, hiding the faces behind them. They walked with slow, heavy steps, deliberate and unshaken by the artificial gravity of the Therax ship. Each held a weapon that looked more like an extension of their arm than a tool. Not one of them raised it. Not one flinched. They didn't need to. The aliens backed away instinctively as the soldiers moved through the hallways like shadows with weight. Several of the younger officers had already taken positions along the wall, away from the main passage, heads bowed, eyes averted. Even the ship's internal defense systems remained still, silent, shut down remotely by the humans before they had even arrived. The Therax captain waited at the entrance to the command bridge, claws folded tightly behind his back, his jaw locked. He did not bow. He did not speak. He simply waited, as protocol demanded. One of the human soldiers stepped forward. It was taller than the others, the plates on its chest and shoulders thicker, broader, possibly a commander. The visor's glow shifted slightly, scanning. Then the voice came, not from the helmet, but from the walls. "Captain?" It was the same voice as before, calm, measured, human. "You are now under Terran custody. There will be no retaliation. There will be no public execution. We will not destroy your vessel." The captain did not respond. He knew the voice was not asking for answers. "You will answer questions. You will provide data. You will cooperate fully. In return, your crew will remain unharmed." The words settled over the room like the coldest wind imaginable. And then, a pause. The helmeted figure raised its hand slowly and pointed toward the nearest command terminal. "We want the records." The captain blinked. "Records?" The voice clarified, this time sounding harder. "Convoy logs, attacks, patrol routes, communications to the Therax High Directive, every raid you've participated in. We want it all." The captain's mouth was dry. "Why? You already stopped us. You have the data from this attack." There was a long silence. Then, "Because this wasn't about one attack." The captain hesitated. "Then, what was it about?" The soldier tilted his head slightly. Behind the faceless visor, nothing could be seen, and yet the captain felt watched, studied, not by a man, but by something built to assess danger, to mark threats, to remove them. The voice did not answer the question directly. Instead, it said, "There were 6 convoys attacked in the last 8 weeks. 4 we responded to. 2 we missed." It paused. "The people you killed were not soldiers, not government. They were civilian engineers, scientists, logistics workers." The weight of the words pressed against the captain's chest. "Collateral," he muttered. "Unfortunate, but—" "They were building outposts." Another pause. Then, something changed in the voice's tone. It grew quieter. "You think we're expanding. You think we're claiming space. That we're preparing to conquer your territory." The captain narrowed his eyes. The voice dropped lower, as if revealing something dangerous. "We weren't expanding. We were building bunkers." The captain's breath caught. "What?" Another step forward. "We were building shelters, silent posts, hidden fallback points. This isn't about territory." And then, "It's about survival." The bridge went silent again. Every crew member froze. A chill moved down the spine of the captain. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The strange ship designs, the intense, focused construction, the Terran warships that did not patrol borders but hovered in deep space, still and watchful. They weren't preparing for conquest. They were preparing for something worse. Before the captain could speak, The human commander raised a hand again. A small device lit up in its palm, projecting a soft blue hologram into the air above the bridge. Wreckage. A ship. No. A graveyard of ships. Twisted metal. Shattered hulls. Pieces of vessels so large, so alien, that even the Therax couldn't identify them. And floating among the wreckage, strange flickers of light. Energy signatures. The voice returned. We've seen things out there that make your weapons look like toys. Creatures that don't just kill. They erase. Entire worlds. Gone. Not conquered. Consumed. Another pause. And now they're moving again. The hologram flickered off. The commander's voice softened for just a moment. You thought you attacked a supply line. You attacked a lifeline. The Therax captain stared at the floor, for the first time truly shaken. Not just by the power of the Terrans, but by what lay behind it. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And whatever was coming was worse than anything they had ever imagined. The Therax captain stood motionless beneath the ghostly light of the now darkened hologram. Its echo still lingered in the air, as if the wreckage it had shown had left a burn on the very walls of the ship. His mouth opened slightly, but no words followed. What was there to say? The Terrans had dropped a truth on him heavier than any weapon. His crew remained frozen behind him, their confidence stripped away layer by layer with every passing second. These were not cowards. These were raiders, assassins, soldiers trained in the void silence to strike without remorse. But now, none dared speak. Their blood ran cold, and for the first time in their lives, they weren't sure who the real enemy was, or if they had already woken it. The human soldiers didn't gloat. They didn't sneer or smirk. There was no satisfaction in their movements, only grim purpose. The lead Terran turned away from the captain and motioned to the others. Two broke formation and moved with sharp, fluid precision toward the ship's primary databank. Without a single word exchanged, they began slicing into the system. Without tools, without violence, just coded taps on a sleek black pad. Within moments, the Therax systems began blinking in surrender. Folders opened. Firewalls collapsed. Data flowed out like blood from a fresh wound. The captain watched helplessly as the core of his ship, the records of every mission, every target, every order, was taken apart in front of him like a toy. He tried to speak again, voice cracking through the dry silence. You said you wanted the logs. What else? The commander didn't look back at him. Ship schematics, warp patterns, all contact with Therax High Directive. We need to know who else has been watching us. So this is about revenge. That made the human pause. Then the voice returned, quieter this time. This isn't revenge. If it were, you'd already be dead. The captain clenched his jaw, but said nothing. Moments passed like hours. Suddenly, one of the Terrans accessing the database stopped. Commander, the soldier said, voice muffled behind the helmet. I have something. The lead Terran stepped over. The holopad between them lit up, casting a pale glow across the armored figures. The screen displayed a map, rough, jagged, not marked for trade or navigation. A deep space scan. Sectors well beyond both Therax and Terran space. The dark outskirts. Unclaimed zones. Empty, at least officially. Except it wasn't. The scan showed dozens of data points, pings, faint signals buried beneath noise, some old, some recent, all dangerous. Unregistered wreckage sites, the soldier explained. They're not on Union records. Not even the humans had these until now. The commander studied the display, his head tilting slightly. The captain stepped forward, finally regaining a sliver of his voice. We found those in the void beyond Sector 87. We thought they were ruins from an ancient war, something that died out long before our time. We didn't go near them. The commander responded instantly. You should have. The captain frowned. Why? The lead Terran zoomed into one of the data points. The image sharpened, showing a long, jagged vessel, half buried in a field of shattered debris. It wasn't like anything the Therax or Terrans used. It was too long, too narrow, almost skeletal. Its surface was warped, twisted, like it had been melted and reshaped over and over. There were scorch marks all along the hull, but not from plasma or kinetic blasts. The kind of burns that came from something else. Something unnatural. You saw this, the commander said slowly, but you didn't ask what did it. It wasn't ours to question, the captain said. It wasn't alive. No, the human replied, but something around it still is. Another image flickered up, this one less clear. A thermal scan, weak, fading energy signatures across the wreckage site, motion, power surges, flickers of something still active. The Terran's voice grew heavier. We've been tracking these for years. We've seen wreckage this old and signs this fresh. It means something out there survived. Something that destroyed ships we can't identify. And now, those signals are getting stronger. The air on the bridge seemed thinner. The captain took a slow breath, uneasy. You think these ruins are waking up? The commander shook his head. Number, I think whatever killed them never went to sleep. No one said anything for a long time. Finally, the data stream slowed. The Terran soldiers backed away from the terminal, letting the information flow back into a secured link. The lead commander stepped toward the captain again. You're going to return to your command. You're going to deliver a message. The captain's spines stiffened. A message? The Terran's visor glinted under the glow of the monitors. Tell them this. The next time someone touches a Terran lifeline, they won't get a warning. He let the words hang in the air. Cold, certain. The captain nodded once, slowly. The truth was clear now. This hadn't been a punishment. It had been a line in the stars. Cross it again, and the consequences wouldn't be survival. The Terrans turned in perfect silence and moved back toward the airlock, weapons untouched, steps heavy. The bridge remained quiet until the last of them vanished down the corridor. When the docking clamps released, the sound felt like a gasp for air. The Invictus drifted back, its form once again swallowing the space outside the viewport. And then, without a single word, it turned and vanished into the dark. No jump signature, no hyperspace flash. Gone. The Therax captain stared at the space it had left behind. A long silence passed before anyone dared speak. Then, Tharek stepped up beside him. What now? The captain looked down at the holopad still displaying the ancient wreckage scans, the shadows, the things that stirred out there in the cold. He swallowed. Now, he said quietly, now we find out how late we really are. The bridge of the Therax vessel remained dim and hushed as the void reclaimed its silence. Only the quiet hum of life support systems and the occasional flicker of a damaged interface reminded the crew that they were still adrift, still intact, for now. Captain Vorsk, once a respected predator among his kind, felt as though the floor beneath his claws was no longer solid. Not because of a battle lost. There had been no battle. The Terrans had not needed one. They had made their point without a single casualty. That was what unnerved him most. And deeper still, beneath the fear, something else had rooted itself in his mind. A question. The kind that didn't come with answers. Only consequences. Why were the humans building bunkers in places no one else dared to go? He turned away from the main display and motioned to Tharik. Seal the logs. Encrypt everything from the moment we first scanned the convoy until now. Tharik hesitated. Sir, if High Directive sees what happened, they'll want to retaliate. Vorsk finished for him. They'll call it an insult, maybe even a trap. But that's not what this was. He paused, gaze hardening. It was a warning, one we're lucky to have survived. Tharik nodded slowly and stepped away to obey. Vorsk remained alone by the viewport, watching the stars and thinking. Not like a warrior, but like something more dangerous. A witness. Several days passed before the Therax ship limped back into familiar space. It had taken a slow, winding route home, avoiding known relay stations and patrol routes. The crew had barely spoken, their eyes cast downward, each haunted by the silent ghosts left behind in that black stretch of sky where the Invictus had vanished. Their arrival at the outer defense ring of the Therax core was met with suspicion. Not because they were late. Therax captains were often late. Not because of damage. Vessels returning from raids almost always bore the scars of victory or retreat. No, the suspicion came from something deeper. Something in the crew's posture, in the silence that clung to their words. Something had broken them. Within hours, Captain Vorsk was summoned. The High Directive, those who ruled the Dominion from their golden thrones orbiting the capital world, had learned of the failed raid. A convoy left in ruin, but no Terran ships destroyed. A vessel full of trained Therax warriors returned shaken and quiet. The council chamber was vast and echoing, its dark stone floor reflecting the starlight filtering through the massive glass ceiling above. A symbol of power, of pride. Vorsk had walked its length many times before, but this time it felt longer. 12 counselors sat in a semicircle before him. Their eyes glimmered with sharpness, with expectation, with the subtle hunger of those who had never known fear, but had tasted the scent of it recently. Captain Vorsk, said the central counselor, an elder named Jayen. Your mission report was vague. I kept it that way for a reason, Vorsk replied. Explain. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. We attacked a human convoy. Standard pattern. No resistance. Until... His voice faltered, just slightly. The council noticed. Until... Counselor Reth hissed, leaning forward. Until one of their warships arrived. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. One. Just one. They didn't fire to destroy us, Vorsk continued. They didn't need to. They shut us down, breached our ship, and took everything. Counselor Nera narrowed her eyes. Then why are you standing here? Because they let us go. The room fell quiet. Counselor Jian's voice dropped lower, colder. And why would they do that? Because we attacked more than just freighters, Vorsk said quietly. We interrupted something they were building. Not weapons, not military strongholds, but bunkers. Colonies designed to hide, not to expand. The words hovered in the air, heavy and strange. They are preparing for war, Reth muttered. No, Vorsk corrected. They are preparing for something worse, something they haven't told the galaxy about. And they didn't kill us, because they wanted us to carry that message back. Counselor Nera scoffed. Humans bluff. They always bluff. Loud noises, big ships, overbuilt egos. They showed us scans, Vorsk cut in, of wreckage, ancient wreckage, ships bigger than our cities, torn apart, not by weapons, but by something else, something alive. He stepped forward, claws clicking on the stone. They found the aftermath of a war none of us knew about. Something's out there, beyond explored space. Something that kills not for conquest, but for extinction. The chamber remained still, the weight of his words settling across every face. Then, Counselor Jian leaned back. And what would you have us do, Captain? Hide like them? Abandon our patrols? Stop probing their defenses? Vorsk didn't answer immediately. He looked up at the stars above, flickering through the transparent ceiling. I would have us listen, he said softly. For once, I would have us learn before we act, because I looked into the eyes of those Terran soldiers, and they weren't proud. They weren't angry. They were preparing. A long silence followed. Finally, Jian dismissed him with a cold wave of his hand. As Vorsk turned to leave, he caught Nera whispering to one of her aides, He's shaken, unfit. If they had something to fear, they'd have said it openly. Vorsk kept walking, not responding. But inside, he knew. They already had. Far away, across uncharted space, in a sector with no name, a different ship drifted. It was not human. It was not Therax. It was something else. It had no hull in the traditional sense. Its body was layered with ever-shifting plates of a living material that shimmered with a pulsing organic glow. Its shape was hard to define, sometimes long, sometimes coiled, as if space itself bent around it to suit its needs. Beneath its surface, movement stirred. Faint signals echoed from deep within the void. Ancient pulses, warnings, or perhaps invitations. The wreckage of what came before still floated nearby, drifting bones of forgotten civilizations that had not heeded the signs. And now, something else had arrived. The thing in the dark turned slightly. Not in a mechanical sense, but in a way that suggested it had noticed. Something across the stars had called to it. A disruption. A flicker of energy far away. The humans had built their bunkers. But the storm had smelled the fire. And it was waking up. The thing in the dark began to move. Not with engines or thrusters. There was no need. It drifted as if pushed by something deeper than gravity, like instinct, like hunger. Shapes unfolded from its core, long curling appendages that shimmered with metallic flesh and organic bone. Light bent around it, time warped near it. It didn't make sound, but still it screamed, a silent cry that no living creature could hear, yet every star around it seemed to dim at its passing. The Erebus was awake again. and it had noticed the galaxy noticing back. On the edge of human space, just beyond the fortified line of satellite arrays and deep sensor grids, alarms lit up in perfect unison. Silent red warnings blinked across hundreds of screens in dozens of stations. Signals, so faint and ancient they barely registered, flared to life. But this time, they weren't fading. They were coming closer. Captain Elias Grant stood on the bridge of the Invictus, watching the stream of alerts with a grim set to his jaw. The ship had been on high alert for the past 40 hours, ever since their encounter with the Therax vessel. His officers moved in sharp, silent coordination. There was no shouting, no confusion, just a practiced calm. Because they had always known this moment would come. He turned as the transmission from Earth came through. The seal of the Terran Defense Command glowed blue for a heartbeat, then flickered away, replaced by the face of Admiral Se-Jin. "It's confirmed," she said without preamble. "The Erebus have breached the outer veil." Grant nodded once. "Estimated time?" 6 hours, maybe less. We've begun emergency activation of fallback protocols. Civilian zones are being locked down. Black zone bunkers are being sealed. "And the rest of the fleet?" "Already mobilizing," she replied. "But you know as well as I do, they'll hit us first." The connection closed. Grant stood in silence for a long moment. The bridge crew didn't need to ask what the orders would be. They had drilled for this moment 1,000 times. Now it was real. "Open wideband secure," Grant said finally. "I want every warship in range, listening." A communications officer nodded, then gave the all clear. Grant stepped forward, hands behind his back. "This is Captain Elias Grant, of the Terran vessel Invictus. All Allied forces, stand by for Defensive Protocol Omega Black. This is not a drill. All ships are to assume hardened formation around key worlds and fallback arcs. If you're hearing this, you are the line." He paused, voice growing harder. "We have spent decades building ships that could survive the impossible. We've fortified, we've hidden, we've waited. But the wait is over. The Erebus are no longer shadows. They're here, and they will not stop." His voice softened just slightly, just enough to carry weight without fear. "Make peace with the silence, because soon it will scream." He cut the feed. The Invictus began to move. Its engines ignited with a slow, deliberate burn. From hidden hangars along its underbelly, drones launched in every direction, scanning, relaying, forming a net of awareness across thousands of kilometers. Nearby, other Terran ships emerged from warp, sister vessels to the Invictus, each just as dark, just as silent, just as deadly. They gathered like wolves, closing ranks around their core systems. Shields hummed, weapon bays opened, fleets repositioned across space, not to strike, but to survive. Because this wasn't war. It was an extinction event. High above Therax Prime, Captain Vorsk stood once more before the Council. But now their arrogance had faded. They had seen the same signals. Their deep space probes, once used to monitor human expansion, had picked up the same terrible signs. The Erebus were coming, and humanity had been right all along. Vorsk didn't argue. He didn't try to convince them. He simply stood in silence until Grand Counselor Jian nodded once. "We will stand with them," he said, and just like that, the message was sent. Across the stars, alliances shifted. Enemies became soldiers under the same banner. Ships that once fired at each other now flew in formation. The Union's ancient fleets, the Therax strike wings, the Talari cloud forms, the crystalline armadas of the Zorai, all answered the call. The galaxy had faced many wars, but never like this. 6 hours later, the edge of Terran space turned black. The Erebus came like a tide. They didn't move like ships. They didn't broadcast signals. They simply appeared, huge misshapen forms twisting out of the dark like living weapons. Some looked like ships. Others looked like creatures pulled from nightmares. And some had no shape at all. They struck without hesitation. A single Erebus cruiser tore through a Terran vanguard formation in seconds, its hull bending around energy blasts, its weapons vomiting spheres of compressed entropy that tore ships apart molecule by molecule. But the Terrans didn't fall back. They fired. The Invictus led the charge, unleashing its full arsenal in coordinated precision. Railguns howled. Plasma lances stabbed the void. Warp missiles bent reality in explosive arcs. Every shot was calculated, every blast part of a symphony of destruction. And it wasn't just Terrans anymore. Zorre ships blinked in beside them, their crystalline lattices channeling starlight into coherent beams of annihilation. Therax spike carriers released swarms of autonomous blades that sliced into the Erebus like swarms of hornets. And still they came. Days passed. Then weeks. Fleets shattered. Planets burned. But the line held. In the end, it was never about winning. Not really. It was about holding the flame long enough that others could carry it. And then something changed. In the wreckage of a shattered Erebus Leviathan, deep beneath the broken armor, human engineers discovered something no one expected. Code. It was alive. A message. A signal loop older than any known language. Patterns that echoed the structure of life itself. The Erebus weren't just machines. They weren't just monsters. They were warnings, sentinels, guards. But guarding what? Captain Grant stood once more aboard the Invictus, staring at the decoded fragment now floating before him in holographic light. It repeated again and again, a single phrase. We are not the end. We are the beginning of the silence. He turned to his crew. Send the data to all command ships. We need to know what's behind them. Someone behind him whispered, "You mean there's more?" Grant's voice was low, calm, unshaken. "No," he said, "there's worse."